An Alabama mother is found slain inside her home, and to this day, they still have no idea who did it. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Sherri Smith. Viewer discretion is advised. At the time of this case, Sherri Smith was a 32-year-old mother to 2 children, and they lived in the really small town of Fairfield, which is in Alabama. Sherri was the mother to 2 children. She had 1 son and a daughter, and her kids meant absolutely everything to her. They were her entire world. Her daughter would describe Sherri as vivacious and funny. She worked really hard to support her kids. She was a financial associate at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. But at night, sometimes Sherri just liked to cut loose and go out with her friends and have a good time. She was the epitome of a people person. She really loved being around people. And there just wasn't anyone who just didn't immediately love her. At the time of this case, she had a boyfriend, and her kids liked the boyfriend. It sounded like that there were other people who were not so happy about this relationship. Apparently, Sherri had been attacked by a woman who had injured Sherri's arm in some way. I think that had something to do with the boyfriend she was seeing, but I'm not 100% sure. 4 months before her case occurs, someone breaks into her home and steals the handgun that she owned. At that time, there was no forced entry. And her boyfriend told her, you really need to change your locks and also get an alarm system. And she did end up getting an alarm system, but she had not replaced the locks of her home yet. Which takes us to November 21st, 2011 at approximately 4:30 a.m. Fairfield, Alabama police they receive a call that an alarm had been tripped at a residence. And it happens to be Sherri Smith's house. When police enter the home, they find Sherri on her bed, and she is deceased. Sherri had been shot multiple times. There was no forced entry in the home, just like with the robbery 4 months prior. There was absolutely no sign of a burglary either. According to the boyfriend and according to her children, there was nothing of value taken from the home. No money was missing or anything. What her daughter, who at that point was actually a teenager, her daughter had come to this conclusion that whoever killed Sherri, her mom, was probably already in the house throughout the day, like hiding in the house. There was even a point because her teenage daughter was having a sleepover because this was like Thanksgiving weekend. So her daughter came back to the house just to get a couple of things with her mom because her mom had just gotten home from a trip herself. And then when after all this happened, she kind of thinks to herself, oh my God, that whoever did this was probably in the house when I was in there too. And may have been hiding out in the home over the weekend while Sherri was out of town. And then just sat in her house laying in wait, waiting for Sherri to come home. Based on the nature of the attack, the police do believe that this was probably someone who knew her because the murder seemed very personal. The gunshots, came from a close range, and there were multiple shots. Like this person kept shooting and shooting. And the coroner also found multiple stab wounds. This was done by someone who hated Sherri or was really pissed off at her for something. To shoot someone several times and then also stab them. That is the MO of a very personal murder. But who that person is still unknown. I do believe the boyfriend has been ruled out, that, he is not a suspect. Police have announced that they did collect several pieces of evidence, including forensic evidence, but they have not specified what that evidence is. Like if it's fingerprints, DNA, hair, shoe impressions, a combination of all of it, it's not really known. They have also said that there is a couple persons of interest that they've had over the years, but they've never released any of those names publicly. But they know that this was overkill. The stab wounds weren't even necessary. She would already have been dead. So they have looked into people in her life. They've questioned everyone in her life, and they just haven't been able to come up with a genuine suspect, at least not one that can arrest and, go to trial with, because they want to make sure they have all the evidence so that there is no reasonable doubt. Sherri had a good life. She never really got into any kind of trouble. She was a great mom. She was doing fantastic at her job. Everything was going great. But there is at least one person out there who did not want her to keep living. And somebody somewhere out there has got to know the truth. Somebody has to know who did this to her. Because when a person kills someone, especially like that, they will tell someone. They'll let it slip. Maybe they got drunk one night or got high one night and told someone. It happens all the time. And perhaps that person that was told is you. You can report your information to police anonymously. You do not have to say who you are. You just have to say what you know. If you have any information about the murder of Sherri Smith, please call 205-786-5217. Help Sherri and her children get the justice they all very rightfully deserve.
In the moonlight, my honey, I know with the dawn that you will be gone, but tonight you belong.
This one is not as all over the place as the first one is, but it's still wild. Let's do it. VHS 2 follows the same format as the first in that it's an anthology. But instead of the connector being like that group of lame-ass fucking criminals, instead our connector is Larry and his girlfriend Aisha. So they're private investigators, and the movie starts out with Larry getting a call from this mother who wants him to investigate the disappearance of her son Kyle. So the two of them end up breaking into Kyle's dorm, and in there they find a bunch of VHS tapes. They start watching them, and some of the tapes are the tapes of the fucking hoodlums that I hate from the first movie. So Larry starts to go investigate the house, and similar to the first movie, Aisha stays back and starts watching the tapes. And that's where our anthology begins. Segment 1 is called Phase 1 Clinical Trials, and it's directed by Adam Wingard. So we have our boy Herman here, and he's getting an eye implant because he had an eye that was damaged during a car accident. But it's not just any old eye, it's a camera, and this is a clinical trial, and the doctor warns him that he may experience glitches. As he leaves the doctor's office, he sees this redheaded woman staring at him like very intently. So he goes home and weird shit starts happening immediately. His game controller is not where he left it, a tea kettle like flies off the stove by itself, and then he starts to see figures of people who look dead. This includes this full-grown man and this little girl. So he calls his doctor and he's like, "You're fucking taking this thing out of me, fuck this." So the next day he gets a knock on his door, and turns out it's this girl that was staring at him in the doctor's office, and her name is Clarissa. She tells him that she was born deaf and she had a cochlear implant, and when she got it, she started to be able to hear things. So she knows the same thing's going to happen to him, except he's going to be able to see things. So Herman's like, "Well, it doesn't matter, I'm getting it removed." And Clarissa's like, "That will stop you from seeing them, but it is not going to get rid of them now that they know that you can see them." And then as Herman looks up, he sees yet another ghost, a new one this time, and it's like this overweight dude in his underwear. He explains that to Clarissa, who tells him that this is her uncle. But then she tells Herman, "I know how to get rid of them, just focus on me," and proceeds to take all of her clothes off and bang him. They fall asleep, and sometime later when they wake up, Herman once again sees this little girl. And then he sees Clarissa being dragged out to his pool in the back, where she proceeds to be drowned by an unseen force and dies. Herman runs through his house, he continues to see the ghosts, and eventually he locks himself in his bathroom, where he proceeds to cut his own eye out with a straight razor. He's holding the eye in his hand so he can still see the camera through it, but he obviously can't see these things anymore. He tries to run out of the house, but since he can't see them anymore, he runs directly into the little girl and the man, who then proceed to kill Herman. So Aisha watches this and tells Larry about it, and at this point she also found footage of Kyle on this laptop, and he's talking about the VHS tapes. And he says the tapes need to be watched in a certain order in order to affect you. As she's watching this, we see a figure moving behind her, but she doesn't see it. And she proceeds to watch the next tape. Segment 2 is called A Ride in the Park, and it's directed by Eduardo Sanchez of the Blair Witch Project and Greg Hale. So this one opens up with this dude Mike, who has a GoPro on his helmet, and he is taking a bike ride through the woods. Out of nowhere, this woman runs out of the woods begging for help, saying that her boyfriend just got attacked. Mike proceeds to follow her, where he then sees these zombie-like creatures approaching. He goes to get her, but she is now a zombie as well, and she bites him in the throat. He manages to kill her, but obviously now he's badly injured, and he kind of stumbles through the woods, and eventually he vomits up a bunch of blood, and he dies. These two bikers end up seeing him passed out, and they go up to him to try and help, and they call 911. But Mike doesn't stay dead. He comes back to life, now a zombie himself, and he bites the guy on the cheek. He then also attacks the woman and bites her on the leg, but she manages to run off. Zombie Mike then starts to eat this guy's intestines, and not long after, the woman comes back, now also a zombie from being bitten, and she starts to eat him too. The three of them hear something in the distance and follow it, where they stumble upon a birthday party, and they proceed to attack and bite and kill a bunch of people. And then some of those people start reanimating and start attacking other people too. It's fucking chaos. Eventually, zombie Mike follows this dad and his 3 kids to this car and tries to get in. He notices his like bloody, disfigured reflection in the car window, and it kind of makes him stop. Eventually, we see him get run over by a car, and his girlfriend Amy, who we had talked to earlier, we start to hear her voice because apparently Mike butt dialed her. And hearing her voice does something to him and makes him like self-aware again, and he proceeds to grab a shotgun and off himself rather than live as a zombie. So back to these two. Aisha's sitting in the living room and she's almost like in a catatonic state and her nose is bleeding, and Larry walks in and notices it. Eventually she snaps out of it and tells Larry that she has a migraine, so he says he's going to go get medication for her. And she proceeds to stay behind and watch another tape, and we once again see that figure in the background. The third segment is my favorite. It's called Safe Haven, and it's directed by Timo Giganto and Gareth Evans. This one's about this film crew, which consists of these 4. So this is Malik. He's kind of like the leader of this whole operation. His fiancee Lena, Malik's best friend Adam, and their cameraman Johnny. So they're interviewing this dude who is like this cult leader of this cult called Paradise Gates. They interview him, dude's just drinking straight milk, red flag. And eventually they get him to agree to let the crew into his commune. So they get there and everything's just bizarre as fuck. Everybody's in these like white dresses. There's these kids that are very clearly fucking brainwashed. They kind of hint at the idea like father made me a woman, like talking about this guy. And they end up going to his office for an interview. However, during it, Lena gets super nauseous and runs out, and Adam follows her. During this interview, the camera dies, so Malik goes outside to get a battery. When he's out there, he sees a camera because everybody's wearing cameras, and he hears a conversation between Lena and Adam, and it turns out Lena is pregnant and it's with Adam's baby. These trifling motherfuckers. So Adam and Lena kind of get in a fight and he wanders off. And he wanders into this basement where he finds this woman in stirrups, completely bloodied. He thinks she's dead, but she starts screaming, which causes him to run away in fear. Meanwhile, while Father's being interviewed, a bell starts to chime and he just looks at Johnny and says it's time. And he announces over the intercom that it's time for the reckoning and everybody needs to drink up. All the kids are being given these little cups. It's some Jim Jones shit that's about to go down. So Johnny tries to stop Father, but then he jumps on him and kills him with this box cutter. Meanwhile, we see shots of everybody else in the commune offing themselves at Father's command. As Lena's trying to get out, she is attacked by this group of women and pulled off into the basement. Adam's running around trying to find her, and he runs into Malik getting shot by one of the community members. Adam makes it to the basement where he comes face to face with Father, who this is the most iconic image of the whole movie. He's now covered by all the cult symbols just like cut into himself. He tells Adam the time has come, and then he proceeds to just explode. It blows up. Adam eventually finds Lena, who is strapped to a table and now is super pregnant. Because she's no longer pregnant with the baby, she's pregnant with the demon. And it proceeds to rip its way out of her stomach. Adam goes to flee, but he's now being attacked by cultists left and right who have all reanimated. Eventually he manages to get in the car and drive away, but the demon then chases him and rams into the car and flips it over. We see Adam crawl out of the car bloodied from the incident, and above him the demon shows up. The demon looks down at him and calls him Papa, because again, he's the father technically of Lena's baby. And we just see Adam completely bloody just start laughing, and the camera cuts out. Back to these two, Larry shows up with the medication only to find that Aisha is dead by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And next to her body is a VHS tape that says watch on it. So of course, he goes to watch it. The fourth and final segment is called Slumber Party, Alien Abduction, and it's directed by Jason Eisner. So this one's about these two brothers, Gary and Randy, and their older sister, Jen, and their parents leave them home alone for the weekend. So of course the siblings invite over their group of friends, and of course the younger ones just like torment the older sister and her friends. And at one point while the boys are swimming in the lake, we see underwater this like weird humanoid creature swimming under there too. That night, the shenanigans just continue. The boys continue to torment Jen, and then Jen torments them in response. But the whole group is distracted when this deafening noise rings out and the power goes out. Zach, who is Jen's boyfriend, grabs a gun and goes outside to see what's going on. But before he's able to do anything, he's grabbed by one of these aliens. The aliens then proceed to abduct all the other kids, and they like zip them up in their own sleeping bags and throw them into the lake trying to drown them. And the reason we even see this is because they have a dog named Tank, and they strapped a camera to him, and Tank is in one of the sleeping bags. The siblings, along with Tank, the dog, end up escaping from the lake, and they run into the woods where the aliens are following them. But Tank starts barking, and they can tell where the kids are, and they start to come for them. They see lights and think that they're police lights, so they start to run towards them. But it's not. It's a trap set by the fucking aliens, who then proceed to abduct Randy. Jen and Gary make a run for the barn, but the aliens follow and proceed to attack Jen. These things are fucking scary looking too, guys. The aliens then start to close in on Gary, but before they can even get to him, he is lifted up into the air like he's being abducted. Mind you, this whole time he's been holding on to Tank, but he's no longer able to, and he lets him go. And I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but this segment ends with Tank whimpering and crying as he dies, and the others having been abducted. Everybody's just gone. So now we come back to Larry, and he proceeds to watch the rest of this footage that Kyle has on his laptop. And Kyle explains that he and his mother want to make their own tape. And then he proceeds to take a gun to himself and pull the trigger. However, when he falls, he ends up getting back up. And we see that his jaw is completely gone, but he's alive. Kyle leaves the camera, and as he leaves, Larry and Aisha enter the house. So this happened moments before they got there. As Larry's watching this, Aisha reanimates and attacks him. A struggle ensues, but ultimately Larry manages to shoot her and kill her for good. But Larry made the mistake of running to hide in a closet. And he turns to find that Kyle is hiding there too. And Kyle proceeds to attack Larry and strangle him to death. The movie ends with Kyle giving the camera a thumbs up, indicating that his and his mother's plan worked. You asked, I'll tell you, but be warned, let's do it. Audition is about this man named Shigeharu, and it opens up with showing us that his wife passes away, which leaves him and his young son Shigehiko by themselves. So we fast forward 8 years, and Shigehiko's a teenager, and he tells his dad, like, you really should think about getting remarried, like, you haven't been with anybody since mom. So one night Shigeharu tells his friend Yoshikawa about this, and he happens to be a film producer. And Yoshikawa is like, why don't we hold a fake casting call, and in reality it's an audition for your new wife. So he gives Shigeharu all these files and makes him narrow it down to 30 candidates. So Shigeharu narrows it down, and he is like immediately entranced by this one applicant named Asami. So he tells Yoshikawa, like, that's the one. But Yoshikawa is like, there's something wrong with this girl. I can't necessarily put my finger on it, but I don't like it. But of course Shigeharu doesn't fucking listen. Yoshikawa's suspicions are furthered when he tries to call Asami's references and this music director that she says she works for, and none of them fucking exist. And in fact, this music director or producer is missing. But Shigeharu simply does not care and decides that he is going to pursue her anyway. However, back in Asami's apartment, we see her sitting by her phone for 4 days after the audition, not moving. And behind her we see this mysterious sack. After 4 days, Shigeharu calls her and she answers, pretending like she was totally not expecting it, as if she hasn't been sitting catatonic by her phone for 4 fucking days. So the two of them start to date. They go out and you can tell they are just like enthralled with each other. And after literally like 3 dates, Shigeharu tells his son that he's going to propose to this woman. And he takes her to this seaside hotel to do that. Now, Shigeharu is talking to Asami about all these plans, like, okay, we can do this and this tonight. If we leave now, we can get here. She proceeds to just take all of her clothes off silently and get in bed and call him over. And she shows him these burn scars that she has on the inside of her thigh. And she tells him, I want to be with you. I want to do this, but first I need you to pledge your love to me and only me. So he does, and the two of them do it, but then he falls asleep, and when he wakes up the next morning, Asami is gone, nowhere to be found. He tries to get in contact with her and track her down, but nothing is working. Because like Yoshikawa says, when he tries to call all of the references on her resume, nobody exists. But Shigeharu then remembers that Asami told him where her old dance studio was where she used to practice ballet. But when he gets there, he meets this old man who is in a wheelchair and has these like weird fucked up prosthetic feet. A little bit later on, we find out that this man actually abused Asami when she was a child, and he is the one that gave her those burn scars on her thigh. Shigeharu's next stop is the bar that Asami told him that she worked at with her friend. But when he gets there, he sees this man who tells him that the bar has been closed and abandoned for a year since the owner was dismembered. They found the owner's body parts, but they also found 3 extra fingers, an extra ear, and an extra tongue that did not belong to this guy, and they still don't know whose it was. Shigeharu is so terrified by this that when he looks in the corner, he like hallucinates these body parts on the ground. Back at Shigeharu's house, we see a POV of somebody entering. And they go up to Shigeharu's room where they see a photo of his late wife on his desk. And then we see this mysterious POV going for this bottle of alcohol that Shigeharu drinks every night. So when Shigeharu comes home, he goes to have his drink per usual, but he starts feeling really woozy. And he passes out, and he starts to have these hallucinations, which really are just flashbacks that tell us the parts that we've been missing. He Because now we're back in Asami's apartment, and this sack, which had moved earlier, opens up to reveal that there is a man in here, and it's the music producer that Asami had talked about earlier, and this is why he's missing. And we see that this man is missing 3 fingers, an ear, and a tongue, so that's where those things came from. Oh, he also doesn't have either of his feet. They're also missing. So he crawls out of this bag, and this is the most foul part of this whole movie. Asami takes a dog bowl and vomits into it, and that's his dinner. And he eats it. Shigeharu also has a hallucination where he sees Asami decapitate her former dance teacher with a wire. Now back at the house, we obviously see that the POV person in the house was Asami, and upon seeing the photo of Shigeharu's wife, got completely enraged and drugged him. She then injects him with this paralytic agent that leaves him completely unable to move, however, he is still able to feel. And this is where the real disturbing part of this movie comes in, because this is the torture scene. So she sticks a bunch of needles into Shigeharu in various places, and as she does, she says deeper, deeper, as she pushes them deeper. And as she's doing this, she's giving him this whole speech about how you're just like everybody else and you failed to love me and only me, even though you promised that you would. And she doesn't like that he loves anybody else, including his own son. His son, who, by the way, is supposed to be sleeping at a friend's house, and that's why he's not home to help. Eventually, Asami takes out this wire saw and cuts off one of Shigeharu's feet. But as she goes to start cutting off the other one, she hears Shigehiko come home. He comes in and sees Shigeharu on the ground, and he tries to warn his son, but he can't. And he just watches as Asami approaches Shigehiko from behind. But then all of a sudden, Shigeharu wakes up back in this seaside hotel. And this time when he wakes up, Asami is still in bed next to him. She never left. So this whole thing has been a nightmare, and he proposes marriage to her, and she accepts. And he falls back asleep, and they live happily ever after. Just fucking kidding. He wakes back up in this current situation and sees that that was just a hallucination, so the torture and all of this is really happening. And he wakes up to see a fight ensuing between Asami and Shigehiko. So a struggle ensues, and Asami chases him up the stairs, where Shigehiko manages to kick her down the stairs, and she falls to the bottom and breaks her neck. Shigehiko goes to call the police as Asami and Shigeharu are just laying there staring at each other. And as she lay there dying, Asami just repeats something that she had said to Shigeharu on one of their earlier dates. Basically talking about how she can't wait to see him again, and the movie ends.
I know that I said that I didn't want to hear any more knock-knock stories, but I cannot help myself, and neither can you. So this is a story that I got in my DM by one of you guys, more specifically Danny. Thank you so much for sharing, but also thank you for allowing me to share the story with everybody else. I'm gonna tag him in the caption or somewhere in the video in case you have any follow-up questions for Danny. This is kind of a knock-knock story. We are Puerto Rican but living in New Jersey. About 20 years ago, we went to celebrate New Year's at my parents' house. They lived on the second floor while a brother of mine and his family lived on the first floor. Old homes have the main entrance with steps upstairs as well as a rear stairs that connected to apartment kitchens. Well, midnight was moments away and everyone was getting in the living room to see the ball and begin the countdown. But I was still in the kitchen with my mom helping her with some last minute whatnot when there was a knock on the kitchen door that connects with the downstairs apartment. I went to open it and that's when my mom pretty much tackled me, telling me in a hushed voice that you never open a door that's being knocked on at midnight on New Year's Eve. I asked her why, but she rushed me into the living room for the countdown and everyone started celebrating. I've asked my mom about it several times and she's never even wanted to admit that it ever happened. I then asked my father about it and his answer was that it was just superstition. So a little irate, I asked what would have happened if I had succeeded in opening the door, to which he answered, I would have lost a son.
This is one of the creepier concerts that I've ever seen placed on YouTube. It's not scary until you really think about it. It's just kind of creepy. There's a 1,500 seat theater that is packed to the brim with people. They're wearing their nicest and most formal outfits. It looks like they're watching the theater, the orchestra, a symphony. Men in black suits, ties. Women are in just full-length dresses, gowns. Not a single hair is out of place on any of them, and they're all back straight, staring, deadpan, blank face, dead eyes, staring at the stage in front of them. You see 4 girly pops in what looks like corporate America office attire. They are not dressed like office sirens, but they genuinely look like they work at the corporate headquarters of Home Depot. They're beautiful, but their outfits are not giving performance. They're giving modest. They're giving, ooh, we're a little scared. It's not giving sexy office siren giving a performance. It's not giving concert. But these girly pops are not out here getting their PhDs. No, they're singing and dancing. They are giving their all to this performance, even though the crowd is not. The crowd is not giving back the same energy. They're dancing like their lives depend on this shit. Because one netizen comments, their lives actually depend on this shit. The girlies on stage are not just any performers. They are one of the biggest K-pop groups of all time, Red Velvet. And they're not just performing on any stage. They're performing in Pyongyang in front of the one, the only supreme leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un.
Now, how did this happen?
The girl group Red Velvet has 5 members, but only 4 of them are performing on stage. The 5th member, Joy, is nowhere to be seen. Is Joy okay? Has anybody checked up on Joy? With the other girls, they continue on like this was always the plan. This was part of the plan. Red Velvet looks like they're giving their all on the stage. They're working all their steps. They're hitting all their notes. If there is a place to slack in their performance, North Korea is not one of those places. Because if they fork up just one time, I don't know what would happen to them. I don't know. And while the girls are shimmying on stage, whenever the camera, you know how the cameras love to pan to the audience and they're always screaming like, ah! You see some of the super ones like VIP section crying. I would cry if I was watching Red Velvet. I would literally cry. But you see all of them stone cold faces.
Are they bopping their head?
No.
No bopping?
No bopping. Nothing. Just staring. They're not trying to risk their lives.
How many people's in the audience?
1,500. Not a
right.
single one is clapping. Not a single one is humming. Not a single one is bopping because they can't risk their lives like that. If they've heard this song before, no, they haven't. Because South Korean music is banned in North Korea. So you know this song? No, you don't. No, you fucking don't. Don't you even whisper the lyrics in your head.
Who are these girls? Don't know them.
Who are these girls, truly? And them and their families could be sent to a labor camp if they even look like they know the rhythm of the song. They should act like this is a weird beat. I've never heard beats like this, but I wouldn't even know how to move to this. This is my first time. One comment on the video reads, Red Velvet is singing, Bet You Wanna Dance Like This, and the audience is stunned into silence.
Guys, I have my brother with me again to
Get the fuck in the screen! Hello!
tell him how nice of a sister I am. Okay, fuck off. Okay, guys, today's video was actually sent to... Are you gonna be in or out? Okay, guys, today's video was actually sent to me by my coworker. He sent it to me at nighttime. Perfect time. For some reason, this video scared the fuck out of me. It is in Spanish. So the lady that recorded this video was actually going to the park to work out. And then she happened to come across this little girl on the swing. And this is what she sees.
La forma de una niña y está en un columpio. Lo curioso es de que parece que es en un parque y vueltas completamente en el columpio. 360. Sí, o sea, así de 360 una tras otra. No estaba muy rápido, pero o sea, se veía la silueta, parece como si fuera de una niña, porque inclusive se le ven los cabellos cuando está dando
el cabello
la vuelta.
largo, así.
Sí.
Aparte siempre pasan cosas paranormales.
So if you want to go watch the full video in Spanish, it's from the mystery room, and this is what the video will look like. Can you imagine going for a walk in the park like every other night and you come across this? I don't know why, for some reason like that would scare the fuck out of me. Also, why was she going ham on the swings like full 360? Why the fuck does that door just do that? Wait. My door? Ah! Okay, I'm recording here with my brother, bro. The door just fucking opened by itself.
Spirits that are in here.
Shut the fuck up! Yeah, let's just not work out at night, right? Let's go back to that video because I don't want to think about the door.
Spirits,
in your own
come
home.
to me. Close the door.
No! I'll close the door. We're still sitting here with the fucking door open. Should we end the video now? I don't want to continue this. Anything else you want to say before we leave?
Spirits.
No!
He died by getting shot by a tree. In 1893, story goes that Henry Ziegler smacked someone else's girlfriend at the time. And the husband came with a gun to shoot at Ziegler, missed, and hit the tree. Anyways, the beef was over. Years later, when he decided to take out his tree, Henry Ziegler was alive, he used dynamite to explode the tree because it was such a huge tree. When he used the dynamite, the bullet lodged into the tree from like 12 years ago, fired out, and him right into the head.
No, that's insane.
That's
like,
the epitome
let
of
me wait 12
Instagram.
years.
After all of those years, he got shot by the bullet that missed him when he was gonna take out the tree.
Karma's real, man.
Crazy.
I always say, I'm like, no matter how much people hurt you, just like hold your patience. I believe karma will
Do good by everyone. Spread peace.
You guys want to hear something terrifying? The Prophecy of the Pope. This book was found in the Vatican archives in the 1500s, and it was authored by, his name was Malachi of Armagh, but this book has 111 cryptic phrases. Basically, it predicted every single pope from in 1143 all the way to our current pope, Pope Francis.
No way.
But the scary thing is, after Pope Francis, the last one, it just says in Judgment Day.
Oh gosh.
It literally ends after Pope Francis?
Yes. The creepiest thing that I saw inside St. Paul's Basilica, like bordering the whole inner sanctuary, is every single pope, like a picture of every single pope. But what's weird is that there's only a certain amount of markers to where you can put a picture. One left after Pope Francis. They have always said that once that last slot is filled, it will be the end of the world. What he predicted and the time it took to go from the first pope that he wrote about to the second halfway mark pope was 422 years. And he's saying from the middle one to the end, another 422 years will be the end of the world. And if you do 422 years from the middle pope, which was 1585, that year is 2027.
Dang!
Pope John the 23rd, he said that the end of the world would happen 2,000 years plus Christ's life. So that adds up to 2027 as well.
You know, Dobermans, they're bred to be for the military, right?
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I think in World War II, that's where they scientifically like made these dogs. They bred them specifically to be hunters for snipers.
I think they bred them because bankers were getting like or something.
Oh, that too,
on
yeah.
the way home.
Yeah, there's like a security.
Yeah.
So back in the day, instead of just having like security guards all the time, they would just have a dog.
That's fire.
That's at DMX. No, DMX back in the day, he used to just people.
With his
He used
dogs?
to people with his dog. Instead of he used to has a dog and just like, yo, give me your or I'm gonna let the dogs loose. And then that's what the song, Who let the dogs out?
Oh, that's what it is? Because he... No,
Nah, I just made that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it can't be. No, I was gonna call it, but I was like,
I think
nah,
that's a different artist, actually.
Who let the dogs?
Evil Mothers Rotting in Prison, Part 9. On January 5th, 2023, authorities were called to an intersection in Redding, California, to attend to an unresponsive 2-year-old girl. They took the girl to a local hospital for treatment, but she died hours later. A pathologist revealed the child had 7 to 15 different prescription in her system when she passed away. An investigation began, and the child's mother, 21-year-old Macy Marie Sylvie, was the prime suspect. She initially told the investigator her daughter got into the pill bottles herself. Police wanted her to take a lie detector test, but instead, she faked her death. She left behind a suicide note. Then she fled the area and got a new phone and a fake ID. Detectives didn't fall for it, and eventually they tracked her down. She continued to tell different stories about how her daughter got the pills. Police eventually determined that she poisoned her daughter, then drove out to a rural area and watched the child suffer for hours before she called for help. 8 months after her daughter's death, Sylvie was arrested and charged with murder and kidnapping. In May 2024, she pleaded guilty to both charges. She was later sentenced to 33 years to life in prison. She never revealed a motive for her crime.
The serial killer cannibal who fed his victims to customers at his barbecue food stand. This case is disturbing, disgusting, heinous. It's almost not even human, and this is definitely not the video that you're going to want to be eating while watching. Have you guys ever heard of Joe Metheny? We know very little about his childhood. What we do know is that his father passed away in a car accident when he was very young, leaving his mother, a struggling single mom of 6 kids, where she was forced to work like 4 jobs, work overtime just constantly. Joe claims that he had a terrible childhood, and because of how often his mother worked, that he was very much neglected. But his mother says that, she was doing the best that she could to provide for her family, and because of how hard she was working, her children never went without food or a roof over their heads. Joe's mother also says that her son was a very normal child. He was almost perfect. He was very, very smart, and he never got in any trouble. When Joe turned 18, he joined the army, and he was also studying physics at this time, but sadly, this was also when he developed an addiction to hard substances. When Joe left the army, he chose not to go home. He lived on the streets of Baltimore. He was homeless, he was a drifter, continuing to use hard substances. And this would be Joe's life for many, many years. In his late 30s, Joe met a lady. She was also homeless, also an addict, and he ended up getting her pregnant. For the next handful of years, Joe really tried to turn his life around. He attempted to get clean. He put his girlfriend and his son in like a real home. He got like a really good job. He was a truck driver for a pallet company, and everything was good until one summer night in 1994 when everything changed. Joe came home one night after a long week on the road to find that his girlfriend had left him for another man, a substance dealer, and she took everything in the home with her, including their 6-year-old son. And after losing his son, Joe suffered what I could only describe as a mental breakdown. He began using hard substances again, but now even more frequently, if that was even possible. He lost his job and was living back on the streets. Despite Joe's life choices and also his outward appearance, he's this big, intimidating guy covered in tattoos. Joe was always described as being super kind, super friendly. He was like that big teddy bear type. But after Joe's girlfriend's betrayal, he had this hate in his heart. He also had, this devastating loss of losing his son. He could not find him anywhere. Pairing that with all these hard substances he was using constantly, it was like something switched in Joe's brain. For months, Joe searched for his ex-girlfriend and his son. He ended up hearing from a mutual friend that his ex-girlfriend and her new man had gotten arrested, and his son was now in foster care. Unable to get custody of his son because he was a homeless addict, he was at a standstill, and he decided that his girlfriend and her new man had to die. He ended up hearing from another friend on the streets that his ex-girlfriend and her new man were being released from prison, and they had planned that night to go under this local bridge to buy substances. So Joe decided that he was going to show up too. It was the middle of the night. He starts walking towards the bridge with an axe in his hand. But once he got to the bridge, his girlfriend and her new man were gone. The only people there were 2 homeless men sleeping on a mattress, and they were both high. So Joe wakes these men up and he's like, yo, where's my girlfriend? Where's my girl? And the men say, hey, she was just here, but she bought substances. She used them with us and then she left. He decided to take his anger out on these 2 men that he barely knew with his axe, and then he left their bodies on the mattress that they were just sleeping on moments earlier. After leaving the bridge, Joe is in this frenzy type state. He's on all these substances. He just starts randomly going up to random people saying, where is she? Where's my girl? He ends up using his axe to kill 2 S-workers that he didn't even really know, and then he attempted to dump their bodies in a nearby river, but he was caught by a dock worker who was working the midnight shift, so Joe says that he killed him as well and also put his body in the river. Joe has gone from being a seemingly normal, kind person to having killed 5 people in one night. Those 2 men that Joe killed under the bridge and left them on that mattress, their bodies were not found, or at least reported to be found, for 3 weeks. But once they were, Joe was suspected and he was brought into custody. But unfortunately, they acquitted him and he was back on the streets. With Joe's name now cleared, he ended up getting his job back at that pallet company, and his boss even allowed him to live on the property of the company and sleep in a trailer that was on the property. For some reason that is unclear, Joe decided that he no longer felt the need to find his ex-girlfriend, get revenge on her, or even find his son, but he still had this hate inside of him. He began luring women back to his trailer with the promise of giving them substances or, something else, and he would kill them. And one night after killing one of these women, he was so out of his mind on substances that he said that he ate her and that he liked it. And I cannot understand this man's logic here. I don't understand why he chose to do this, but Joe claims that he ended up opening up a barbecue food stand on the side of the street where he would sell sandwiches of his victims, and that people were unknowingly eating his victims and that they liked it. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. I will get sick if I keep talking about the details of that part of this case, and I'm not even kidding, because while I was actually researching this case, I ended up feeling very sick, and like dry heaving. So that's all I'm talking about when it comes to that detail. One of these women were luckily able to escape Joe. This was a woman that Joe had known for years. He lured her back to his trailer with promises of giving her substances, and when she was there, he attempted to SA her and threatened to bury her back in the yard with the rest of the girls before she was able to fight him off and escape. Joe was scared that this woman was going to bring the police back to him, and he decided that he needed to get rid of evidence, more importantly, get rid of the bodies of his victims that he had buried on the property. And remember, this is like not his house. This is the property of like the place that he worked. But since Joe was using all these substances, he says that his memories from this time were really foggy. A lot of it was a blur. He did not even remember where he had buried his own victims. So Joe decided to call up one of his friends. He was actually a co-worker. He worked for the same company, a man named Clint. And he told Clint, "I need help moving a body." Clint comes over and Joe even shows him where one of the victims were that he remembered burying. And then Clint goes, "Hey man, yeah, I'm gonna help you with that, but there's something I need to do at home real quick. I'll be right back." And then Clint goes to his boss and says, "Hey man, Joe's killing girls and burying them on your property." And you'll never guess what Joe and Clint's boss said to Clint, but his boss said, "Don't tell anyone about this and forget you saw anything." So this part of the case gets a little confusing, but I'm going to try and explain it to the best of my abilities. So Joe and Clint's boss at this time was actually being investigated by the FBI for a possible involvement in organized crime. So when Clint comes to him and says that there might be women buried on his business's property, this man doesn't need any more like heat on him and his company, so that's why he told Clint to forget you saw anything. But the boss's son was actually in cahoots with the FBI. He was like turning his dad in, so the boss's son ended up giving Clint his contact at the FBI. Imagine this FBI agent's shock. He's working on a case of like organized crime and then just stumbles upon a serial killer. So Joe and his boss were both arrested. Joe made a full confession. He, told them everything. They ended up finding 2 bodies on the property, but because Joe was so out of his mind, he tried to help them find more, but they were unable to ever find more. But they were able to link him to a total of 5 murders definitively. Although Joe claims that he killed at least 10 women this way, and then you have those other 5 from years earlier. Joe was sentenced to death, but that ended up being overturned, and then he was sentenced to life in prison, where he passed away behind bars at the age of 62 in the year of 2017. And because I'm sure you guys are gonna ask, Joe's boss ended up getting 10 years in prison for his involvement in organized crime and also trying to cover up the fact that his employee Joe was a serial killer. This case is so disgusting, but it really shocks me how Joe was, this really good kid. He joined the army, he was studying physics, he was this nice guy, and then he became this grotesque serial killer. I blame drugs. You need to stay away from hard drugs. They can really, really change a person. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know all your guys' thoughts in the comments. Let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.
This story that I'm about to tell you is basically one of the reasons why I'd be so scared to be a parent. So there's a couple and they have 2 girls and they both work. Because they didn't want anyone taking care of their kids, they decided that one of them would work overnight and the other one would work during the day. That way one of them would always have their kids with them. So dad decided that he would be the one working overnight and the mom would work during the day. So it is nighttime and the mom is putting her 2 girls to bed. She tucks them in, she reads them a book, and she makes sure that they're actually asleep before she leaves to her bedroom. She mentions that when she's in her room on her bed, she can still see the doorway to her girls' bedroom. She says that in their house, they all slept with the doors open just in case like the girls needed them or something happened. So once she left the kids asleep, she goes to her bedroom, she lays on her bed and she pulls out a book and starts reading. So as she's reading her book, she notices a little girl pass by in the direction of the restroom. She really didn't think anything of it because she just thought, oh, my daughter has to go to the restroom, and a few moments later, the girl came back, went into her room, and she assumed she went to bed. She continues to read her book, and a moment later, she sees the figure of the little girl go again to the restroom and again go back to the room. And then a moment later, she sees the figure go back to the restroom, and this time she's like, okay, they are playing around. So she gets up because she wants to see what the heck they're up to. So by this point, the hallway is not lit up. So she kind of stands by the hallway because she wants to catch them, messing around so that she can get after them. So she saw when the shadow came out of the restroom, go back into the little girl's room, and then again go from the little girl's room back to the restroom. So this time she was like, okay, well, I need to go figure out what she's doing in there. So when she gets closer to the restroom, she notices that the door is open, but she sees where a little girl kind of peeks her head out to look at the mom. The mom realizes that this is not one of her daughters. However, the little girl seems to be similar age to her daughters, which is why she thought that it was one of them. The mom also notices that this girl seemed to have like burned injuries all throughout her body. Her body like has a lot of black marks, like charred, like from a fire. The mom says that when the little girl popped her head out, she sees her charred body, like her teeth are also dark, but the little girl looked at the mom like this. Okay, hold on. I'm getting scared. She goes like this, peeked out the door. Mom notices like a burned victim pretty much, and the little girl just smiled at her. In that moment, the mom, all she could think of was to ask the thing, what are you doing? What do you want here? The reason why she said that she was so like brave enough to ask whatever this was, the question was because this thing was obviously coming in and out of her daughter's bedroom. The mom does mention that throughout her life, she's always experienced paranormal things. So that's also part of the reason why in that moment she wasn't that scared, but it did shock her because she thought it was her daughters coming and going. And now she was concerned because it was obviously not her daughter's and it was something that was coming in and out of her daughter's bedroom. So in that moment, she goes back to her room, she pulls out a Bible and she starts reading it. She also calls her husband and tells him he needs to come home, that she is scared, and eventually they do end up bringing someone to cleanse the house. And she mentions that nothing, you know, this little kid never appeared again. I cannot imagine myself as a parent witnessing this. I would be so, there's no way I would be like, what are you doing here? Fuck. I might just run and be like, oh shit, my kids. Like, oh shit, I gotta go back for them. What in the world would you guys do? Because I know some of y'all are parents. Maybe I'd die of a heart attack if I saw that. Like, what the fuck? There's actually another story from this same lady because unfortunately for her, this wouldn't be the last time that she encounters something paranormal. So I will make a video on that story. It's a lot shorter, but I'll post it probably after this one.
You know the drink Shirley Temple?
Yeah.
Do you know the actual true backstory on the girl? The whole backstory of the Shirley Temple was with a little girl who was like for a lot of money back then.
Oh.
Because she was born during the Great Depression. Her family's trying to come up with any money she can. So she was in the TV, movie, like actor business,
Yeah,
right?
she was in the Hollywood scene.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
yeah. Whatever roles that they were giving out, like she had to do obviously the weird stuff too. Her family. Yeah, we'll take it. $1,000, we'll take it. Use Shirley as a... And one of the movies that she was in, I think it was War Babies. They were kids acting as adults. And her role in that was a female... She was like first grade, second grade doing this.
They're making her do that.
And you know like how back then adults would treat if they misbehaved really weird.
Oh.
They had this thing called the black box.
Yeah.
You know what? You take a wild guess what the black box is. It's like there's this video that I see on TikTok. You know how campfires, they kind of give off like a glare?
Yeah, yeah.
There was this grandpa holding his grandchild.
Yeah.
He was dancing around. The person on the opposite side of the campfire was taking a video. A lot of people are saying that it's the glare from the campfire, but the thing is the child points out something dancing next to it in the video. So,
let me see.
And it follows him. The caption is, "This is so scary. I know y'all see that thing following him."
Let me see.
Just wait. You see that?
Oh,
don't look and just keep watching. Bam. It's like dancing.
Yo, it has
beside-
horns.
Yeah. Look. And then
Oh my
bam.
god.
Look, and the baby will point it out.
Yo, what the
Now it's here. Look, the baby's looking at it. Look. He said, "Gamma, stop." And points at it, fam.
Oh my
Look.
God.
This story, every time I hear it, gives me the chills, so I want to share it with you too. So this guy says that when he was in school, there was a couple that lived in the same neighborhood and they had a son, and unfortunately their son passed away while he was at school. He says that the lady, the one that lost her son, she was always so nice and everybody knew her in the neighborhood, but after that happened, he hadn't gone over to her house. He does claim that his mom had gone over and the mom would tell him, look, if you ever see her, she might say that her son is still alive, so just go along with it because you don't want to, put her in distress again. So apparently the mom had gone over to the house just to give them her condolences, and the mom was like, oh, he's still here, he's not gone, and that there were altars, and that she would be talking to her son in a picture frame, and that basically his bedroom, nothing had moved. To the lady, that her son was still there. So time has passed, and the mom came to her son, and she's like, hey, you haven't seen her in such a long time, like we should go take her something to eat and just visit for a little bit. He agrees, and of course he remembers, like, if she says he's still here, so we, let's not say anything about that. He says that when he got there, for some reason he felt such a negative vibe, and he said that was weird because when they went in there, they were all having conversation. The lady was talking to his mom, and she was like, oh yeah, he's still here, like my son is still here. He noticed that they were adding a plate at the table for the son too, so of course he didn't tell her no, he's not, because like what the fuck, right? So the lady goes to get something from the kitchen, and him and his mom were in the living room, and from the living room you could see the hallway that leads to the bedrooms in that lady's home. And him and his mom, they swear that they saw a shadow of like a little boy move in that hallway, to the point where they looked at each other and they're like, what the fuck, like I thought she was here alone. In that moment, the mom, the one that lives there, comes out of the kitchen, and immediately his mom says, is there anybody else here with you? And the lady is like, no, well, just my son. What the fuck? And obviously they didn't want to be like, no the fuck he's not. So the mom and him just look at each other, and the lady continues, she's like, yeah, he's always with me, like he never leaves me alone, he's always going with me everywhere. He said that in the moment he just wished he could just run out the door, but they didn't, just out of respect for her. But they knew that she was home alone because her husband was at work. And that's not even the end of it. He claims that there was another occurrence where the mom and his brother went to this lady's home, and that his brother also saw it. The guy says that he doesn't believe that that's that lady's son because of how heavy the energy is in that home. He feels like she's giving the energy to something that's pretending to be her son. He said that the last time he had gone over, because there was another time he went over to visit her, it got to the point where that house is starting to smell really weird. Like nothing like, spoiled food, or it was just a distinct kind of smell that you just know there's something not right there. This story is not gonna be that scary. It's just a game of hide and go seek with La Llorona. Nothing is safe anymore. No knock knock joke, no hide and go seek. All jokes aside, I heard this story and I was like, I need to share it with you because I love you so much and I'm not the only one that has to be scared. Of course, this story comes from Mexico, more specifically Guanajuato. So these kids decided to go out in the middle of the night to play in the monte, and the guy telling us the story, his name is Juan. This happened when he was little. He was very scared of the dark, so his friends had to convince him to go out and play. So after a bit of them playing out there, they all decided to play hide and go seek, and they all went their separate ways. So Juan decided to just run away as far as he could because he didn't want to get found. But by the time he knew it, he looked around and he was lost. He didn't even know how to get back to where his friends started playing the game. But since he was a scaredy cat, he was there alone, he decided to start walking and not just stay in that spot because he needed to get away from there. So as he's walking, he sees this abandoned ranch. And out of nowhere, things just started changing. Like it got cold, a lot of fog started coming in to the point where he couldn't see anymore where he was going. It was so silent, he said you could hear a pin drop. And in that silence is when he heard a woman just cry so loud. Juan got so scared just hearing that, but he didn't want to panic and he just decided to keep walking. So as he's walking again, he couldn't see anything and he just bumps into this like piece of concrete. To him, it looked like somebody's tomb, but when he turned to the side, he sees a lady dressed in all white. He says that she had so much hair in front of her face he couldn't see any facial features, but he also noticed something else. He noticed that it looked like she was floating rather than walking. And not just that, this lady was crying uncontrollably. Juan was so scared that he also started crying uncontrollably, but in that moment he closed his eyes and he started praying. And after a few minutes, he heard nothing else. He peeked with one eye and noticed that that lady was gone. Strangely, so did the cold atmosphere and the fog was gone as well. Juan started running after this and surprisingly he found his way back home. When he goes into the house, his grandma sees how panicked he looked and asked him what happened. Juan explained everything to his grandmother, and as he's telling her the story, her face is like serious. Juan is now an adult, but he mentions that his grandmother actually sat him down and told him the story of La Llorona and how in that place where he was, a lot of men have crossed through there and claim to have seen the same thing. His grandmother told him that the tomb of La Llorona was actually there and that there had been some men that go missing and don't even come back home. I'm just curious what happened to his friends because he doesn't tell us anything about that in the story.
The biggest con artists of all time. George Parker was a New Yorker who in the 1920s attempted to sell some of New York's most iconic landmarks and succeeded. Madison Square Gardens, the Statue of Liberty, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art were just a few locations that he would sell to wealthy tourists. His favorite location, by the way, was the Brooklyn Bridge, which he sold twice a week for several years, one time for as much as $50,000. He made millions before the cops caught up with his fraudulent schemes, and in 1928 they locked him away for life. Back in the 19th century, sisters Kate, Margaret, and Leah Fox convinced the world that they possessed the power to speak with ghosts. The girls would snap their fingers and spirits would respond by making rapping noises all around them. They did this for 40 years, becoming international stars and rich. They later revealed that they had been cracking their toes and ankle joints to make the sounds.